Okay, hi all. It's Saturday, the 11th of April, and many of you have asked me to give more information about what's happening in the current uh, pandemic situation. So I want to start off by talking about the human body, because this is important to know. We're all aware that the human body has incredible regenerative powers. For instance, if you cut your skin, it automatically starts to repair itself. It seals the wound, creates the scab, it repairs itself. If you have problems with your liver, if you correct it, it will regenerate. The liver can regenerate itself. The lungs, even somebody who has smoked all of their life, if they stop smoking, the lungs start to repair themselves. The brain, even the brain, where scientists once thought that the cells didn't regenerate. There was a boy born many years ago with no brain, virtually no brain. But over time, his brain grew to a full-sized brain. So clearly the human body has this incredible regenerative capability. And that is all controlled from the individual cells, from the DNA within the cells. And so here's the secret to understanding what's really going on with this so-called virus that's happening. Now, when somebody perpetually gets worse, it's when the repairing of the cell is outweighed by the damage that's being done to the cell. So the person progressively gets worse and worse and worse because the effect of what is happening is stronger than the rate at which it can repair. If the repair rate is stronger than the cause, then the person will get better. It's really that simple. If we think about things like cancer, leukemia, this is where the cells progressively get beyond the repair rate. So you get worse. But if you can reverse that, then the cancer can reduce. A tumor can reduce in size, can disappear. And all of this is created by the DNA within the cells. In fact, scientists are looking for and creating genetically engineered cures to diseases. They're realizing that there are genetic flaws inside the genetic code, and they're looking to fix those genetic codes. So clearly this is where all of the key information is to what's going on and why it's going on. Now, this all happens through cell regeneration and cell division, and it's created and controlled within the DNA. Now, the scientists have said, oh, well, there's lots of what they call junk DNA in there. All that is DNA that they have no idea what it does. And to call it junk is a real insult, because the human body is incredible at what it can do. There is no junk DNA in there. And this is where it's important for us to understand how viruses really exist. The other thing that's important in the cell is the mitochondria. The mitochondria are like the furnace. They're like the energy generator within the cell. And when they're enacted, they produce heat as a byproduct. Hence why when you're dealing with something that's happened to the cell, it creates heat, you get a fever, because this is the mitochondria acting to deal with whatever the challenge to the individual cell is. Now, we talk about it, oh, the body, but the reality is it's each individual cell in your body that is responding here. So when you've got a fever, all of the cells in your body are being affected. They're all overproducing to try to deal with what the conflict is, and they're producing large amounts of heat. I've got notes here to make sure I don't miss anything in what I'm saying. So now we've got a viral pandemic that's been created, and we're seeing people dying all over the place. Well, we're being told about it by the media, but we're not really being told what they're dying of. There's no autopsies going on here. We've just got somebody saying, oh, this person died of coronavirus. So clearly something that's happening that's causing these people to die. We're not negating that people are dying. It's just a question of the numbers and what the causes are. Now, there are things out there on the planet called bacteria and fungi, and these things are living beings that can invade a host and cause death. Viruses are not living entities. Is there a possibility that what science is calling a virus is in fact a bacteria or a fungus? Because if a virus is not a living thing, how does it survive on a tabletop, on a piece of paper, and get passed from one person to another? This is not a viral transmission. We're being misled about this because it's not a living thing. And these things aren't strong because we're being told that all you have to do to kill this virus is wash your hands. Well, you can't kill something that's not living. So what does the process of washing your hands have to do with it? And I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to give you some background on all of this at the moment. So let's what is a virus? Okay, let's do a little bit of a history lesson on what a virus is. The concept of a virus goes back to the 1870s. In fact, it goes back even earlier than that, because the word virus comes from the Latin virus, which refers to poisons and other noxious liquids. And that was first attested to in English in around 1398. So we're talking about the meaning of that was an agent that caused an infectious disease, and it was first recorded in 1728. So this was something that they noticed that was happening, but they didn't know what the cause was. So they basically were saying, well, there's something, a poison that is causing this disease within the body. And then in 1876, there was a guy called Adolf Meyer, and he was the first to show that what he called a tobacco mosaic disease was infectious. And he thought it was caused by a toxin or a very small bacterium. And then 8 years later, a French microbiologist invented a filter, which we now know today as the Chamberlain filter, that had pores that were so small that bacteria couldn't go through it. So he filtered out what he thought was all bacteria. But the possibility is that he just filtered out large bacteria. He didn't filter out small bacteria that's smaller than it. So he made a false presumption. So he thought he removed all bacteria, and therefore everything else that went through must be something else. Then in 1892, a Russian biologist used the filter to study what he now called the tobacco mosaic virus. And he showed that the crushed leaf extracts from the infected tobacco plants remained infectious after the filtration. And he suggested that the infection might be caused by a toxin produced by the bacteria, but he didn't pursue the idea. Well, what if the toxin that was produced by the bacteria was a smaller cell division, like an offspring of that bacteria? But they didn't pursue the idea. They just went with this concept of virus. Then in 1898, there was a microbiology teacher who repeated the experiments, and he became convinced that the filtrate contained a new form of infectious agent. See, these were all suppositions. These were not facts. These are scientists trying to prove themselves worthy by creating and discovering something new. And he observed that the agent multiplied only in cells that were dividing. Now, this is a key point here. This thing that we're being called a virus, this toxin, only occurred in cells, living cells, that were dividing, okay? So call that, and he called it a soluble living germ, and he reintroduced the word virus, okay? So that's where we're getting this concept from, of something that only happens in a dividing cell, in a living cell, not externally. After that, there were some American biochemists who proved that they were in fact particles, i.e. that they were living things and not a liquid per se. And they discovered in 1931 that this tobacco mosaic virus was mostly made up of protein and RNA parts. So that's bits of DNA strands, which are nucleotides. And bits of non-living matter. So the origin of virus is unclear. We don't really know what they are, and more importantly, we don't know where they come from, other than they only originate in dividing cells. So now we're being told that a virus infiltrates a cell and then causes all of this stuff. Well, if it infiltrates the cell, then it should be found externally. But what we're finding is it only appears inside the cell. This is where it comes from. And I'm going to explain that because it's very, very important. But there are basically three hypotheses, not facts, three hypotheses to explain the origins of viruses. One is a regressive hypothesis. One is a cellular origin hypothesis, that they've evolved from bits of RNA and DNA that have escaped from larger organisms, but from the organism itself. And there's a co-evolution hypothesis. And if you want to look into those, you can, but I'm going to stick with this cellular origin hypothesis, but not that they're coming from cells outside of the host cell, but they're coming from within the cell division process of the cell itself. That's where they're originating. So you don't catch a virus, what they call a virus, you create a virus inside every cell of your body as a result of a stimulation from some external force or action or thing. Okay, that's really important to remember. So I'm going to move on a little bit now. Okay, so let's get into the effects, external effects that we're being told of this supposedly dangerous, deadly thing that's floating around in the air, that we have to stay 1.5 meters away from each other, and we can't socially get together, and because we could spread this virus. And it's all about these death rates that we're being told of coronavirus. But how many death rates are we seeing for people who die of normal flu? Now, in 2019, the World Health Organization said that around about 650,000 people globally died of the flu. In 2020, January 27th, in the US, there were 8,200 flu deaths. Well, we're getting all these figures for coronavirus, but what's happened to all the flu deaths? They've all disappeared. Suddenly, this coronavirus has cured people of the flu. No, that's not what's happened. Everything is being allocated as a coronavirus. Now, they can't even identify this specific virus they're talking about. They have no test for it. The only test they have is a generic test that picks up general coronaviruses, plural, not this supposed specific one. Now, that means if you've had a cold, if you've had the flu, you're going to test positive for coronavirus. Most of the population are going to test positive for coronavirus, common cold. Now, what's been happening is, because of agendas from a higher up, doctors are being told to record a death, no matter what the person dies of, if they've tested positive for coronavirus, to list their death as attributable to coronavirus. Now, here in Victoria, I think we've had 10, 12 deaths. Most of those have been people 70 or over, and a large majority of them have been in hospitals, in cancer wards with terminal cancer. And they've died of cancer, or they've died of a heart attack, or they've died of a stroke, and tested positive for coronavirus, so the death has been listed as a coronavirus death. And there are doctors coming out all over the world who are bringing this fraud to the surface, saying they're being told to list it as a coronavirus death when it wasn't. Where are all the autopsies? Nothing's being happened here. So they are inflating the numbers of deaths attributable to this common cold flu or influenza. Why are they doing that? Why can't they be truthful? They must have an agenda if they are trying to lie to the public, and most people are buying this bullshit. And if you're buying your bullshit, I'll tell you all about it when we get to the end of this. The death rates in America in 2019, 8.8% of America's population died in 2019. Now, America had a population of 329 million people, which means that 28 million people died in the US last year. 28 million. 650,000 people worldwide died of flu. So we are being stitched up about the supposed deaths attributable to this supposed virus that is externally attacking us. So why is it being put forward as this fraud? Well, we'll get to it. There's a little guy out there called Bill Gates. Most of you know him from Microsoft. And he's proposing that everyone get vaccinated. And he's got all these shares in vaccination companies, in big pharma. And he's on the World Health Authority. In fact, he's the second biggest funder. He may even be the biggest now because the United States is thankfully pulling out of this corrupt organization. But have a listen to what Bill Gates said back in 2010, because this is his agenda. He said, if we can vaccinate the world's population, this will result in a direct reduction of the world's population of 10 to 15%. That's what he said. Now think about that. 10 to 15% of the world's population, and we're about 7.8 billion people at the moment, 10 to 15% of the world's population is 1.17 billion people that will die because of vaccination. That's what he said and proposed, that if he can vaccinate people and make a lot of money, he can kill off 1.17 billion people. Well, doesn't that make you wonder what's in these vaccinations that's going to kill that many people? And that's his agenda. That's what he wants. Now, if you're not sure about all of this, I suggest you go to a little site called WeForum, WeForum.org, because it's all there. And I've posted a link to a woman who's exposed some of the stuff on this, and I'll try and put it with this. WeForum.org, this is the Kabbalist Illuminati's agenda. And this website came out in March 2020. May have even been there slightly before then. This website is 200 layers deep of information. This thing cannot have been constructed as a result of the COVID-19 virus. It had to have been constructed way before the virus. And it's all there in all the details, what their agendas are and what the role of this so-called virus is all about. If you're not sure, go and read 1984 and go and read Brave New World, because it's all in there. They always tell you ahead of schedule what they're going to do. I'm going to give you a little acronym now before I do a bit of free ranting. COVID, COVID, compliant, obedient, vaccination-induced death, because that's what it is. Now, you might think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but you know what's really interesting is the majority of people who are speaking out against vaccines, who are speaking out against 5G, the majority of these people have high IQs and they research. So they're not easily led astray because they dig deep before they come to a conclusion. And the majority of people who call us tinfoil heads and conspiracy theorists are people whose IQs are considerably lower and who do no research and simply believe what the media is feeding them. And who controls the media? That's the free press, isn't it? No, the same people who own the media and have been using it as propaganda for the best part of 50 years are the same people who are bringing you 5G, the same people who are bringing you this so-called virus. So you can keep calling us conspiracists and idiots and where's your proof, but you don't look for the proof anywhere. You just believe what you're told. So believe what I'm telling you, or do some research, have an informed opinion. Because what's going to happen is you're going to all rush out to get the vaccination. And you know what? All us tinfoil heads are going to be glad because you're all going to die. But what I am sad about is you're going to go and vaccinate your children as well, because you're not going to do the due diligence. And so not only are you going to kill yourself, but you're going to kill your children. And that's where I get sad. So let's talk about how this effect is happening. Electromagnetic radiation or any sort of stimulation causes a breakdown in the genetic material in your DNA. Now, your body tries to repair that in a cell division by replacing it and correcting it. And it creates a section, the broken section, and it removes it. And it creates a copy of what it's doing to fix it. So what it does in trying to fix itself, it creates a lot of heat. It then has to get rid of the broken part. That little strand of RNA that's toxic is now in the cell. See, that's what they say. Viruses are created in cells at the time of cell division. Not cell division, cells repairing themselves, the DNA repairing itself. So that section of broken DNA, which is now an RNA strand, because it's one of the two strands, is now ejected from the cell and it's coated in a protein to protect the body, and the messages are sent to other cells. This is how you try and fix this. And the toxin has to be ejected from the body. That's what they are calling the virus. It's the byproduct of the DNA trying to repair the cell and keep the cell functioning. We're going to have a big shift to what's going on here, people. If you don't want to know the truth, stick your head back in the sand. And when you all die, we won't have to say, I told you so. But we'll be sad for your kids, because they deserve better. I'm out of here.